My name is Kim, and I'm the Kids and Missions Pastor here at Clearwater. And today I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what's going on here. But first, I want to make sure we take a minute to welcome our newcomers. If this is your first time here, we just want to welcome you and ask that you fill out the little Connect card that's in the seat back pocket right in front of you. We would love to get a chance to get to know you guys. We're not going to be flooding your email with a ton of emails. We just want to simply get to know you a little bit better. So if you take a minute to fill that out, and then when service is over, we would love it if you would step outside in the lobby, out to my right side. There will be some pastors and staff or hospitality team who would love to meet you and just get to know you personally. So welcome. And now I want to tell you a little bit about what's going on here. We have a ton of stuff going on with the holiday season. Too many things to go into right now. If you want to get an overview of it all, make sure you look out at the sign-up counter. There's a bunch of things to get involved in there. But I want to highlight a few right now. We have been talking for the last few weeks about our One Day to Feed the World campaign through Convoy of Hope. And we've watched some really awesome videos. And if you're not familiar with Convoy, it's an organization that works nationally and internationally to help those in need, those in poverty. They have all kinds of programs to feed people who need food, just a lot of different ways that they are working to help those in need. And we have taken the challenge to do the One Day to Feed the World campaign, where we choose a day, work for that day, and then we give that day's wages towards Convoy of Hope's program. So this is the day that we're going to take those collections. There are actually, you may have them already, but there's a little packet and some envelopes you can put your donations in. And then at the end of service, there's a little box in the back by the sound booth. You can put those checks or whatever it is in there. Any checks you can make payable to Clearwater Church. The next thing is our Adopt a Family. This is kind of a broad umbrella that encompasses a lot of different things. You probably noticed our giving tree out in the lobby. That is one way that you can participate. You can grab an ornament from the tree, and it has on it an item that you can buy for a child. So purchase that item, bring it back to the church unwrapped before Christmas. That's one way that you can get involved. Then we have a toy packing night. We have chosen to adopt Axis, which is the school that uses our building. And anyone in need in Axis has nominated their families, and we are going to help those families specifically by going to Loveland on, let me make sure I get this date right, December 5th. We'll have a team that goes to the Loveland Serve 6.8 toy room, and we will pack toys for the kids in those families. The sign-up sheet is out on the counter out there if you want to get involved. This is a great outreach opportunity for families. I personally, as a mom, would love to have my kids be a part of giving toys to other kids. I just think it's really cool. So that's one way you can get involved. And then the last thing, which is my personal favorite, it's a connection event that we're going to have here at the church on December 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. And that is where we're going to distribute those gifts to the Axis families. We'll get a chance to meet them, connect with them, we'll have a few fun activities for them. But we really just want to have a chance to get to know these families a little bit better. So I'm excited about that. Also, sign-up sheet out in the lobby if you want to get involved there. Okay, so today we have a special guest. Brian McLeese is with Convoy of Hope, and he's going to come share with us this morning. Before he does, I'm going to pray over the service, and then we have a video to watch. So, God, I just lift up this morning to you. We ask that you would come and move amongst us. I pray that you would be working in our hearts. Help us to tune out distractions and just tune our hearts into you. And I pray that you would speak through Brian this morning. Just really help us to grasp the things that are happening around the world that seem so far away from us. Help us to really grasp that and for it to mean something deeply to us. I thank you, God, for this morning, for the holiday season coming, and for all of these people who are here. I just thank you for all of your blessing. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, watch this short video.
Well, I think that the church is an extension of the hand of the Lord, not only to encourage a person individually to pray with them, but to come out with teams and rip out drywall, bring food. Love is an action word too. Love is a verb.
Convoy of Hope, they paid us a favor back in 2017 after Hurricane Irma, so I felt like it was my duty to give the favor back. The next day after Irma, we were walking around looking like ghosts, like what has just happened. We lived in our vehicles for quite some time. We squatted in houses. The beauty about it is the community came together. Like I said, that's why I'm here today, is to give our help back.
It was a house that little by little we fixed up, and this was going to be my forever home. And I've widowed for about 13 and a half years. So I was overwhelmingly devastated, but I saw people coming out, and Convoy of Hope, I had hope in my heart that there would be help. I was just overwhelmed at the sweet and the nice and the beautiful people that came out, and they were willing to open their heart and their hands to me. I thank God that all of this work is done. My heart is overflowing with graciousness and thankfulness to all the help you've given me. This is huge.
Fort Myers, Florida would say thank you for all you did last year and your one day to feed the world. Way to go, Kim. That was a lot to cover. I don't know where she's probably with the kids now. She's working hard this morning. I love your focus that you're got your sleeves rolled up and you're going to pack toys down in Loveland. I'm from Loveland. We always need more toys in Loveland. And I've just been a fan of Randy and Gay for decades now. We both were enamored with the call of Christ to reach people for Jesus by starting churches, and that's how we became buddies. And I'm really proud of their hearts for the poor and the suffering, for giving space for you to step into the role, if you will, of the parable Jesus taught, probably one of the most famous, of the Good Samaritan. And there's Kim. And so to say that we have become your trusted innkeeper, if you will, to the Good Samaritan is an understatement. And we're going to give space this morning to respond to what Jesus does in your heart by going to the cross or lighting a candle, any number of other expressions. But today what we have to do in way of response is an opportunity to align ourselves with the King and his heart for the poor, which isn't described just in the parable of the Good Samaritan. If you want to flip ahead to Isaiah 58, we're going to be there in a minute. I want to give just a bit, if you will, of kind of a shareholders report on what happened during this last year. You've known now for a couple years that we had set a goal of feeding 500,000 children every school day by 2025, 500,000 by 2025, and 1 million by 2030. How many of you are believing with us that God can do that? I just want to let you know that as of this month, we are now feeding 465,000 children every school day. Yes, give yourselves a hand. Thank you for helping us. How many of you know we're going to make it to 500,000 by 2025? This past year, we empowered 35,000 women in about 18 countries to start their own businesses. Together, we trained 23,000 farmers how to increase their yield, all done in training sites which are local churches around the world. And we responded so far to this morning to 65 large disasters. And there's always the ones that are in the news, seems like for a week. And then there's the ones you didn't hear about. I thought, would you be interested? It can be a little bit of a list. Reading a list okay this morning to let you know just kind of where we've pointed the resource to the refugees in Afghanistan, the Hungahi Apai volcano, which I don't think is the right pronunciation. That's just my best effort at Pacific Island speak. So in Tonga, the Hurricane Lisa in Belize. These are all active, ongoing responses, guys. So this isn't just what we've done. This is where we are this morning working. The humanitarian crisis in Haiti, food insecurity in Cuba, food insecurity in Lebanon, flooding in Pakistan, Vietnam and Philippines, Super Typhoon Noru. Typhoons are perennial in those places, and it's no wonder we're still working. Of course, Fiona in Puerto Rico. As of 2 weeks ago, we distributed nearly 500,000 meals so far, and shared relief supplies to 30,000 people in 74 different communities in just Puerto Rico. In Central America, are you getting tired of the list? I'm sorry. Hurricane Julia in the Horn of Africa, the hunger crisis in Venezuela, flooding and mudslides. These are all active, ongoing responses that you're helping to empower. And we just mentioned, of course, Hurricane Ian. There are others where we've been already for 2 years, but they're so off the radar that, oh yeah, I remember that would be, and that list is much longer. But we're still working there because the church is still living and serving and loving among those places that were impacted. So thank you. I would add, too, that the sub-Saharan issue in Africa has been a place where we've been serving for more than a decade, and it's hardly ever in the news. But the situation is dire. We're in places, even in Kenya, where people that we're discovering are feeling fortunate if they've eaten in 3 days. And if they did not have outside help, they wouldn't eat at all. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, certainly not least, is the crisis in Ukraine. But over the course of this past year, Convoy of Hope has resourced churches to serve over 29 million people in a year. Thanks to you. Well done. I just want to say a bit about Ukraine. You know, today is the 260th day since they were attacked by Russia. And let's be real, it's Putin. And typically in a year, in a disaster that occurs internationally, our primary number that we reached would be around 20 million meals in a foreign country. Now, the response in Ukraine is taking place in 16 countries because the refugees now are fleeing. So, yes, we are setting up along the trail to where they're going ahead of time to care for those in 16 different countries. And at this point, in 260 days, we've given out, through local churches, 40 million meals in 260 days. That's a miracle. When it first hit, the need was so dire that the shipping and the ports were even being compromised by the conflict. We had to air freight them into Poland on the border. We found out, you know what the freight is on overnighting food to the border of Poland? It's $500,000 a plane. How do you overnight that? Well, the owner of, Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Airlines, called and said, would you, literally, we're just praying, would you like me to overnight food to the border for you guys for free? So things have happened. God can use extraordinary people that you would think of, well, who's the list? Who should we go through and talk? You probably wouldn't think of Richard Branson, but God does. And it turns out that the currency of the kingdom is not dollars. It's the word of the king. And he can touch hearts, even ours, in a moment and change everything for another person's destiny. Included in the team this year has been Demi Tebow, Tim's wife, and Roma Boots. And that's another partnership where the donations have increased specifically because of seemingly the strategy. A friend of ours who's a professor in Poland and a former general in the army said that as he's been tracking where the missiles are landing and all of that and recording the data, the strategy is clear that this is an attempt at destroying all the critical infrastructure and making it impossible for Ukrainians to survive this winter. That's malevolent. And there's some bad actors in the world, aren't there? But the good news is, when we align ourselves with the King and we take on the things that are near to his heart, he ends up doing things that are dear to our hearts as well. Did you know that in Ukraine, through your partnership with Convoy of Hope, 80% of the churches have all been served resource for food in advance of winter? 80% of the churches have already been canvassed in 260 days. So thank you. You might not know, it's not going to be on the news, that in most of the churches, it's standing room only. And it's mostly men coming to Christ, giving their lives to Jesus. Because you've taken up that role as the Good Samaritan, trusting your day's wage to an innkeeper. Jesus is making a difference. And I just wanted you to know that. That's my shareholders report. Are you ready for the scriptures? I am. I don't see a clock on the wall, so I guess I can talk as long as I like. Right? Oh, thank you. I can't talk as long. In fact, I got to pick up the pace. Well, have you ever walked into a room and had this experience? Why did I come in here? Forgotten why you've entered that other room? I hate seeing some of you giggling. Some of you are turning to the other person next to you because you saw them do that. I don't know. Maybe this just is my confession, but there's a couple of us in the room that have had that happen. And it's not to trivialize, but sometimes when I read the narrative of the Old Testament and Israel, I think, now there's a group of people that walked out of the room into the other room and forgot why they were there. I mean, quite the room. When you go through a Red Sea and you come out the other side and then have all the mishaps start to happen almost as if immediately. What's happening when we go in that other room? I've never read the research on it, but it seems to me that along the way to that other room, I had another thought about something else I needed to do, and I was already starting to work on that issue, and it became my default or dominant thought. Anybody buy in on that? And that led me to what is it about Israel, and what was their default thought? You know, some of the things that emerge from the text, we're not going to dwell on a lot, but one, they liked the food they used to have. You know, that's something maybe we can relate to. Or some of the other things that came out, you brought us out here to kill us. You would have thought that going through a sea and watching your enemies drown would sort of quench that thought. Literally. But apparently, these dominant thoughts and default thoughts have a real power. And it led me to say, what are some of the voices, or nowadays devices, that we lean into, or the ideas in the culture that can shape us and our thinking more than the King's voice? Is a real thing to consider as followers of Christ. What is that appetite that's inward and secret that really governs my choices? You know, I'm really looking forward to pecan pie this next week, so I'm not going to bash anybody about what we're about to do and having friends over and eat. I think that's wonderful. I think it's something that pleases the Lord for us to be thankful. But there's a balance, right? And when you start to say things about God, what are they when it doesn't go your way? For Paul, I would suggest to you that one of the great thoughts that he would want us to have, since he said it was one of those mysteries that was filled with the riches of heaven, was to come to this knowledge, Jew or Gentile, radical thought for the first century, that Christ in you is your hope, the hope of glory. That's the dominant thought that governed. Watch Paul's life sometime. Take that study and say, what was the power of that thought throughout his journey in following Jesus? Well, along the way, when Israel lost its way, one of the things that God did, Yahweh, stirred up the heart of a prophet. And my favorite, maybe you have your favorite, was Isaiah. His name means, did you know this? Yahweh is salvation. Yahweh is salvation. And in his book are the issues that were critical to his time. You see, Judah had been living for 50 years in prosperity, and she'd forgotten why she was blessed. She was blessed to be a blessing. She's become tolerant of idol worship, spending resource on selfish pleasure. Nations around her are collapsing, and leaders are so disappointing. A little bit of biography, Isaiah, you know, he had basically served in the court of 4 different monarchs. 3/4 of them were corrupt. And his message, if you distilled it down, is that there's a better king coming. Who would want the task of getting to deliver that message to the king? Yeah, you're king, but there's a better one coming. And he's supremely able to save us. He's faithful. He's just. And he'll deliver us from self-righteousness. His book is quoted some 22 times in the New Testament. And it's all designed to help Israel begin to practice those things that will bring the favor back upon a distracted Israel. Pick this up in Isaiah 58 and listen to the clear call to obedience that Isaiah issues in the little word if. Watch for the word if. Is not this the fast that I choose? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry? See, they were doing external things that they thought would bring the right balance and the favor back to God. But inwardly, they were doing everything that their flesh wanted. Just doing external sort of things to sort of appease God. Well, God can't be manipulated. And he comes back to them and says, is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house when you see the naked to cover him and not to hide yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he shall say, here I am. If you take away the pointing of the finger and speaking malicious talk. Wow, does that sound like social media? If, and we're talking about the church. He's talking to God's people. If you put away the pointing of the finger and malicious talk, I better move on. If you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desires of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness, and your gloom be as noonday. And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in sun-scorched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a well-watered garden, like springs of water whose waters do not fail. And your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in. And lest we think that was just Isaiah's happy thought, let me remind you that 700 years later, when Jesus introduced his ministry, he framed it by unrolling the very same scroll. The scroll of Isaiah. And he said, he asked for the scroll of Isaiah, and it was given to him, and he unrolled it. Can you imagine that scene? That would have riveted the room. Like, where is he going to speak from? The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to what? Proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. There's so many things that stir within us, because if I were to ask you, what is poverty? What would your answer be? Some might say the lack of money. It's much, much, much more. In our own story, our origin story at Convoy of Hope, I've shared before that Hal Donaldson's the founder and president and the chief visionary to this day of the organization. But it was birthed out of tragedy. And I may have even shared this. I want to share it again. From a bit of a biographical article he wrote that helps answer the question, what is poverty? He says this about being a 12-year-old boy going to school. I despised walking into school with holes in both my shoes and jeans. And every lunch period reminded me that I was different. I was eating mayonnaise sandwiches. And off-brand peanut butter crackers. Meanwhile, my friends ate tuna fish and apples and Hostess cupcakes. And needless to say, they'd never want to trade with me for anything I had to offer. We couldn't always afford a barber, so I grew my hair long and I trimmed it myself. I detested standing in line at the grocery store with stamps and confessing to my Little League baseball coach that I couldn't afford, though I needed, a new baseball mitt. But nothing was worse than being targeted by bullies. When you're labeled a poor kid, you get shoved in the hallway, harassed in the locker room, ignored by girls, and ridiculed when you're not looking. They laugh at your clothes. They pretend you smell like dog manure. It's no wonder I suffered from class anxiety. I vowed that someday I wouldn't be poor, but most of the time I didn't have enough self-confidence to even try. And those years helped me to understand how poor families remain powerless. For generations, they begin believing that they're just third-class citizens. They suffer from what sociologists call social immobility. They feel trapped in a pit of circumstances, and they don't know how to climb their way to freedom. May I suggest to you that poverty is much more than not having enough money for a pair of Nikes. It affects the whole totality of a person's way of viewing the world. And that's the oppression that Christ came to lift off. And we get to join him in that. The night Hal's father was killed and his mom was badly injured, there was a knock at the door and a police officer brought the news. And there had become a group of people standing in the front yard because they'd heard the report that their pastor had been killed. And the 4 Donaldson children were standing on the step with the police officer, and he asked this question: is there anyone who will take the children for tonight so they don't have to be alone? Or we'll take them down to the police station. And he said it took people a while to process what the police officer was asking. And 60 seconds actually seemed like an eternity because no one was raising their hand. But Bill Davis did. He said they can come home with us. Now, the Davis family didn't have a big home, but they had big hearts. I might have a picture of their home. Bill and Levada Davis had 4 children of their own. They lived in a single wide trailer. Now, Bill's dominant thought could have been, hey, I have a family to take care of. I already have 4 kids. There won't be enough beds. But what he did say was, our kids can take turns sleeping on the floor. He could have said, I don't make enough money. I'm barely feeding my own family. But what Bill said was, I'll take an extra shift at the rock quarry. Or he could have said, how am I able to comfort and encourage 4 kids who just lost their father? I'm not a pastor. See, sometimes we get so overwhelmed at the task or the potential power of pain behind the door we're about to walk through that we forget who it is we're walking through that door with. Israel wasn't obviously walking through the Red Sea on their own. It turns out that the Christ we serve and follow is not intimidated by pain. He's a man acquainted with sorrow and suffering. I love the actual thought that Hal recalls that Bill Davis shared with him. He said, Hal, don't let the tragedy of your youth become a lifelong excuse, because where you start in life doesn't have to dictate where you end up. That was the dominant thought. May I suggest to you that's a modern day example of Christ in you, the hope of glory? When Christ is in you, there's hope. You don't have to be everything. You have to be willing to be with. You have to be willing to be with. There's so much power in saying, I'm not going to let that person suffer alone. I'm going to be with them. One day, I taught this last year, that everybody who's ever lived, presidents, plumbers, parking lot attendants, prime ministers, we're all going to live and see this moment where we're gathered together. And the king is going to say and celebrate those who were willing to be with others. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my glory. It's going to be amazing because the God of the Old Testament, revealed in Jesus, faithful to the end, forecasted that moment for us. It won't be a surprise. You can read the whole thing in Matthew 25. This unchanging reality remains self-evident. The king rules with a heart and a hand of favor and blessing on the poor and those who care for the poor. You're so blessed to have pastoral leadership that want you to engage with the poor and give space for caring for your neighbor this morning. A few weeks back, our team was in Uvalde, Texas, and Convoy of Hope resourced a local church to host a vacation Bible school. Through COVID, the pastor had resigned, and a new pastor, who was a little boy when he gave his life to Jesus, had become a businessman, and he said, well, I'll be the interim pastor, and I'm going to have a vacation Bible school. Well, that was before everything hit. Their church was right across the street from the elementary school. And when Convoy of Hope arrived, they gave food and clothing through many generous partners. They supplied students who were going to face a challenging restart to the school year. Can you even imagine? And my teammate who was there, he's a dear, dear brother, friend, Manny Rosario, fluent in Spanish, was able to talk to some of the students in their native tongue. And he got to spend time with the ones that the pastor would stop and talk to. And he saw the pastor put his hand on a little boy's shoulder and give him just extra attention. And then alone in the pastor's office, Manny asked, who is that boy? He said, well, that's Noah. Today is the first day that he's been able to leave his house from the emotional trauma of being shot. He was shot through the shoulder. He spent weeks in the hospital. And then he went home, and he stayed in his room until this day. That's what I mean when I say we have an opportunity to align ourselves with the King. And the millions are being harassed and bullied. And if we pour ourselves out for the hungry, and we see to it that a trusted innkeeper has the means to take care of those who are attacked and robbed, oppressed, bullied, we become part of the narrative that Jesus' favor is resting on. Psalm 82, 3-4, and the band can come up, says this, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, and maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. And God will be with you in that endeavor. That's his promise. There's some bad actors in the world, and they're collaborating to bring pain and suffering and destruction, even this morning in our own state. The Bible says, thou shalt not kill. just want to leave you this thought today as you prepare to give a day's wage. It'll be invested well. Proverbs 19:17 extends this promise. Write that down, 19:17. Proverbs. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he'll reward them for what they've done. May God bless you this morning. As you respond now, there's places here at the cross. There's an ability to light candles. And there'll be some things on the screen for you as you do to give you some guidance. But man, what a privilege to be with you this morning. Thanks for being just willing servants of the King.